Hello and welcome to another episode of Teen Talks. Today is very special.
Yes, it is, because as you guys probably can see, we've got the logo behind us. So we're in the studio, and it's a green screen and everything, and it's super cool.
Yeah, so it's officially our first offline podcast. Plus, we're recording it in a studio.
Yes, it's really
Also, who's the most nervous over here?
nervous. Oh yeah, Spandan. Yeah, no. He's literally like before we started recording this, he was shaking. He's got
Yeah.
butterflies in his stomach and,
he's like,
everything.
Mugdha, I'm very nervous. So I said, okay, I'll do the intro. then."
Yeah.
Better now.
I guess it is.
Okay. So today we are going to have with us a very special guest, Dr. Amy Marschall. And she is a licensed child psychologist who deals.
clinical psychologist.
ये बड़ी अच्छी बात कही आप
Okay.
She mostly deals with children and adolescents. And yeah, we're really excited to have her with us here today.
Okay, so for the listeners, I'll give you guys a brief introduction about her. She earned
Brackets
her,
mein gyan.
she earned her doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Hartford, after which she worked as a child and adolescent psychologist at SIS Falls Psychological Services. Oh, the names.
Nice pronunciations.
Yep. I try my best.
Okay, Mugdha.
Oh my chance. Sorry. Sorry. And now she's also into private practice. She also has a very cool blog, so I'll link it down below. Go check her out. She has some awesome content for everyone. If you want to show it to parents, it's a good one.
Do something. How can we call you?
Like your
How-
pronunciation.
Amy Marshall is my full name. I don't mind, title wise, it's doctor, but I don't mind, conversationally, first name is fine. So,
So I hope we can call you Amy.
yeah, that's fine.
my
And
gosh,
this
she's
is
adorable.
Oh wow.
gonna hang out until he gets bored and then he'll wander off. So,
No problem.
Okay. Firstly, sorry we're troubling you so early in the morning over there.
no, I'm glad we got the time difference to work.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll dive into the questions then.
Okay, so first things first. Most people do have an idea about mental health, and we realize everyone has a different view of it. From your experience as a teen psychologist, what is your definition of mental health?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of a broad category, but basically everyone's got a brain. So everyone has mental health. And kind of everybody, everybody's got something that has been stressful in their lives, especially, lately, last several years. But mental health is basically your own personal, mental wellness and stressors that you're dealing with, how you're dealing with them, coping with them. For some people, they're struggling with things that meet the diagnostic criteria for something and maybe need some support in that sense. But everyone's got it because everyone's got a brain. Kind of like everyone's got a heart, but not everyone needs a cardiologist.
Right.
Indeed.
Right. I must say that I agree with you about the fact that there's been a lot of stress recently in these last few years. And
Mhm.
I feel there's much more pressure on teenagers and adolescents these days because, you got to work about your co-curriculars, your marks, your relationships with your friends and family. And there's a lot of things to work about. And obviously it's frustrating. And sometimes that frustration comes out in unhealthy ways. So how should we deal with that kind of pressure?
Sure. It's hard because it is getting worse, I think. They said, I remember when I was a teen, they were saying that it was so much worse than it had been previously, but I feel like it's just accelerated from there. I mean, I know when social media was first starting, I was towards the end of high school. So when I was stressed out or having a hard time or said something that, you look back and you think, why did I say that? It was just something I would say to my friends, but now everything is documented. So it's kind of stuff follows you. And that makes it hard to just be a kid or be a teen because you're gonna screw up. You're figuring things out. You maybe learned stuff from the adults around you that you're later like, oh, you know what, I don't actually agree with that value. But you're living in an era where before you realize that, it all got documented and posted.
Yeah.
Even like little kids now who are coming into adolescence have their parents posting their baby pictures since the day they were born. Like every second of their lives is just documented.
Yeah.
So if someone really wants to do a deep dive on you, they can literally find from the day you were born.
I know,
I
right?
can't imagine that.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even good stuff. Like parents love to post embarrassing pictures. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then our friends take screenshots of it and
then it's,
post
like,
it
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah, I will. And I report this when I see it, but I know people who, like, I've seen pictures of like a toddler sitting on a toilet, and I'm like, why did you put that on the internet? Like,
yeah, it's hilarious.
Facebook, yeah. Well, I report, and Facebook's like, this doesn't violate our terms, and I'm like, well, it should,
Yeah.
How quirky it is.
Yeah, that kid is going to grow into an adult who's applying for jobs, and their employer's going to Google them and be like, here's you at age 3, pooping.
Sitting
Like,
on the toilet. That's gonna look horrible. Yes.
So now you've treated so many people and you come across so many teens and adolescents. And so like we just got our results today, and fortunately we all scored pretty good.
Okay, for context, there's like matrix in 10th standard here. So we just gave our matrix, and then yeah, so there was a pretty big
Yeah.
result.
Yeah, and it's considered to be pretty big, not the biggest one, but yeah, pretty big.
Yeah.
So we got good marks, but there are lots of people who didn't get as good marks, and maybe they're demotivated, maybe they're feeling low. Do you have something to say to them as well?
yeah, and I'm assuming that's like standardized testing.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the ones we use are different than the ones you all use, but
Yeah,
same
correct.
concept.
Yeah.
That's another spot where there's a lot of pressure, like being in the absolute top.
The main question that I wanted to ask is, can you motivate the students who probably didn't score as much? And can you tell us, if we have a setback in life, how it affects our mental and how to come out of it?
Yeah, I will say, and I hate standardized tests as a whole because it's so specific, and being good at standardized tests is a very specific skill. And it can be very demoralizing when they're like, it sounds like you, and this happens here too, they're basically like basing your identity on how well you're good at this one test.
Yeah.
And you're so much more than that. And like, it's great that, congratulations, it's great that you did well. But also there's like so much more to you as people than this one test. And so, it's okay if that's not your thing. I know they use the scores, like in the US, your scores determine like what college you get into and stuff like that. As far as like life as a whole, it's okay if you're not a good test taker, because actual adulthood is not a standardized test. I know, like for my job, I had to take a standardized test to get my license. It's called the EPPP. And I know some fantastic clinicians who had to take it 3, 4, 5 times because they're brilliant people. They're just not good at this one test format. And so it's okay to not be good at that one thing. It really sucks when they put all the pressure on that, but you're still, you're good at other stuff, and other stuff that arguably is more practical, and I say this as someone who was always really good at the standardized tests. It's not a useful skill anymore because I don't take them, but there's more, there's so much more. And I hate that we put all this on teens of this one thing, this one test.
So if you don't mind, may I ask you a bit of a personal question?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So
Depending on what it is, I might not answer, but
It's completely up to you.
Yeah. You yourself have been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Was
Yes.
learning more challenging for you? And if so was the case, then how come did you overcome it?
Actually did really well in school, which is part of why I didn't get diagnosed. Actually, ADHD, I got diagnosed in December. Autism was March of this year. So very recently. And I think they didn't really notice because I was a good student. And with autism, you get, I don't know how familiar you are with the diagnosis, but a lot of autistic people will have, we call them special interests. Basically, we don't like things a normal amount. We love the things that we're into. We're like, it's obsessive. And so I loved reading. So I read everything, and I was reading college level books in like the 3rd grade. And so they're getting better about this, but there's still a lot of misinformation that basically if you're good at school, you must be neurotypical.
Yeah.
So I did well academically because of that. So it kind of slipped through the cracks in that sense. Socially, I was always super awkward and weird. And the people that I was friends with at the time also later found out that they had either ADHD, autism, or both. But yeah, so learning I did pretty well with, but I think that's a field issue in my job, that we've got to realize that people can be good at stuff and still not be neurotypical. So.
Speaking of mental health diseases, there's obviously a variety of them. So could you maybe touch upon the major mental health issues found in teenagers? And if there's any symptoms of them that we can recognize in ourselves or maybe our friends, so it'll be easier for them to get help,
Yeah, in teens, the stuff like the psychotic disorders are pretty uncommon. So like hallucinations, delusions, it's not impossible, but it's pretty rare. But if you are like noticing that I'm believing things that everybody else seems to think are really out there, more commonly, especially lately, anxiety and depression, and they're way up compared to previously.
Again, standardized tests.
Yeah, tests,
right?
society, friend groups.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
The pressure from all of that. But basically, and anxiety in particular is something that there is clinical anxiety. There are anxiety disorders. But there's also like anxiety is a spectrum, and we all have a certain amount of anxiety.
Okay.
Because if your anxiety is at absolutely 0, you're not doing anything. And we talk about like biology kinds of thing and evolutionary psychology. That's before we had the society we have now, and people, the cave people and all that. The people who the predator comes in, the saber-toothed tiger shows up, the people who got scared and ran away, that was adaptive. Like that's good to get scared in that moment. But the clinical anxiety is when it's not a reflection of the actual danger around you, or when it doesn't go away when the danger is removed, basically. So you're going to be stressed out when you have to do, a test. But when it's like, I can't bring it down, I can't get myself to relax, or I'm paralyzed with this anxiety that it's not anxiety that's making me do the stuff that needs to happen, but it's like stopping me from it. And then depression's very internal. A lot of people with depression don't necessarily show it. But a lot of it is, if you're finding you're not enjoying things that you used to enjoy, you're like pulling away from people, feeling down on yourself more than usual, thinking about like, it'd be better if I was dead, or like thinking of like self-harm, suicide kind of stuff, those kinds of things.
And can you tell us ways in which we can probably recognize and take steps in the positive direction?
Sure. I don't know how the mental health system looks over there. Are there like, is it pretty easy to know?
It's something that's not spoken about too
It's
much.
more like there are professionals available, but it's a very taboo thing, like if you're going to seek mental health, you're crazy.
Yeah,
that's kind of,
it's either black or it's either white. There's no gray space between.
So a lot of people are then scared to go to mental health specialists, even if they know they need it. They are too worried about what society will think, what will their friends think about when they find out. So
sure. Well, and I know over here, something we run into for teens is that most of the time you can't even go in unless your parents sign off on it. So if you've got a parent who's like, well, you're either fine or you're crazy, and that's bad, then they're not going to sign the consent paperwork. So then there's like not as many options. I know that there's good and bad on the internet, but it is good that there's like more support available. But you got to be really careful with the information, because the great thing is that everybody can have a voice, anybody can share their experience, but the problem is that anybody can share anything. So you've got to be able to vet the information, but finding supports that way. I would really hope that we can get to a point where it's okay to go and talk to someone.
Right. Well, we were talking to a few of our friends the other day, and everyone agreed that whenever someone criticizes us, we feel really, really bad, and we take it to our heart, and it's just like, our confidence takes a hit, and it's shoo, and then everything's just like, no, I'm terrible. And so obviously criticism is good sometimes, because it, self-improvement, but not everyone can deal with it in a healthy way. So how should we go about dealing with criticism?
Yeah, sure. That's hard because, and it sounds like there's a lot of kind of perfectionism, going back to the standardized tests again, like you have to be perfect all the time. I get that black and white. You're either perfect all the time or you're garbage. And there's no, and that mentality makes it really hard to accept criticism, because criticism means I'm not perfect. And if these are the only two choices, you've just ruled this one out. So I think that's a realizing it's okay. It's expected to not be perfect. No one is, I'm not. And we do make mistakes, and it's okay to try to be better. And I would also say it's not to that extreme. Like I don't want your whole confidence to be shattered every time someone says, here's how you could do better. But the fact that there is that desire to be the best version of yourself would also be, it's good that you want to be good at stuff and be your best, but it's also okay, the feedback is just helpful. Although sometimes people give criticism in really mean ways, and that's harder to.
That's more harder to digest.
I think we also need to understand if someone is fake criticizing us, or actually saying negative things about us, or is positively influencing us.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And if they're doing it in like oh, you're just awful, I can't believe it, like it does not feel good to hear that. I try to remind myself, okay, if you're having this big of a reaction to me making a mistake, this is more about you right now. This is not actually about
that's actually a good way to deal with it.
That's a different perspective. Okay. So I realized, and I've heard many people say this, my parents say this all the time actually, that your friend circle is really important. Like they can shape you as an individual, and they bring out the best or the worst in you. And we don't realize when a friend is being toxic to us, or if we are being toxic to someone. So how do we identify if we're going on the wrong path because of our friend circle or because of our peer group? How do we identify when someone is being toxic to us?
Sure, that's hard, because you're also still like the part of your brain that does like the logic and the rational thinking, the frontal lobe up here, that keeps growing until about 25, 26. I saw one study that said 28. So basically your ability to identify those things, you're still learning that. So it's I think a lot of it is some of that gut, like, do I feel good when I'm interacting with this person? Because if I don't, then maybe I need to step back. And I do think that everyone has the potential to like either be a good influence or even to like be the toxic person, because depending on the situation and the interactions, there's what are we up to 8 billion people in the world. Some of them, their personality is just not going to mesh with mine, and that's okay. There are people who are going to bring out the worst in me, and that doesn't mean that they're terrible, and that hopefully doesn't mean that I'm terrible, but it may mean that me and them together is not a good fit. So just figuring out who your people are and who brings out the best in you, and being able to set those boundaries, and not like telling someone, you make me toxic, I never want to talk to you again, but just, okay, maybe we're more casual acquaintances.
All right. But I would also like you to stress on the point, how do we identify when we're the problem? Because I know it's a problem with me. Sometimes I find it difficult to admit a mistake I made. So how to work on that, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I think it starts with realizing it after the fact, and then so when you realize after, oh hey, I was not being very kind in that situation, and making amends where we can. But the hope is that you get into that habit and then start noticing as it's happening, oh hey, this is the thing that I'm trying to change, I'm trying to pull out of it. But when you like naming the pattern and identifying it, and then you start to realize it afterwards, helps you to more in the moment realize that it's happening. And then also knowing what kind of things bring that up for you. Like if when I get criticism, I get very defensive very quickly, then you can maybe know, okay, this person's giving me some feedback right now. I need to be aware that this has the potential to bring that out in me, and kind of get out in front of it like that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so as we discussed just now, everyone has their own flaws. We should accept them, and also we should
We should.
yeah, we should learn to evolve and improve ourselves. What is a good way to go about learning to accept and work on your flaws?
Sure. Well, I think because I believe, and this is kind of we call this like a strengths-based approach in my line of work, but I believe that every like trait or quality or personality type or thing has a benefit depending on the situation and depending on the severity. And it has the potential to be helpful or be harmful, kind of depending on how you're using it and depending on the setting. So I like to frame it that there are things that are kind of like flaws, depending on the circumstance, but figuring out, okay, but what is the positive, like what does this give to me? Because you can't give yourself a full personality transplant, but finding, for me, I do a lot of stuff. I did this thing for my work where we had to take this strengths personality analysis, and it said that I'm an achiever, which means that I do a lot of stuff. And the problem with that is I don't stop and I burn out, and that's not good. So instead of being like, okay, I'm somebody who does too much and burns out, I need to not do stuff anymore. I'm like, okay, so I need to figure out how to focus that on the stuff that is beneficial to me, and then kind of avoid it on, is this stuff a good use of my time or my energy, basically. And then getting that, leaning into the strengths of it and not getting into that overdone or toxic or kind of too much kind of realm.
Okay. Sorry, this is not a part of our questions, but I'm asking it anyway. That what do you think are the tips or tricks that we should adapt to, or like few practices that we as teens should adapt so that our mental health stays normal and we are fine and good?
Yeah, like precautions in a way,
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's one tricky thing though, is that there's not one thing that works for everybody.
Yeah,
But
true.
finding what works for you, and kind of seeing, so mental health is kind of like, it's kind of like hygiene. You can't just shower and say, I'm a clean person, I don't need to shower ever again. But having the habits that you find helpful for you, that I feel good if I get an hour each day to decompress and not be, some people like to meditate, some people hate to meditate, but whatever that, what are the things that bring you up and make you feel more like in a good headspace, and then carving out time for those things, whatever they are. And being open to, figuring out a system that works for you, because, sometimes you'll see the self-help books that'll be like, you should do your self-care thing in the morning. And for some people, first thing in the morning is not a good time for that. And that's okay. So kind of seeing what works for you, and what kind of patterns and habits make your brain feel better instead of worse.
We read about you online, and we read that you have 2 cats, which you just showed in the beginning.
Yep.
So can you tell us more about them maybe?
Sure. So that was Armani. He took off a minute ago, but he's my older cat. He's the one who likes to be on camera. My other cat doesn't like to be on camera so much.
Okay.
But Armani is 12 years old. Actually got him a week before I started my doctoral program. His mother was a stray, and this vet found her and found that she was pregnant and took her in. And she got rescued, all his siblings got rescued. So I moved for my program and he was the only one left. And so he came home with me. So he's been with me the whole way with that. And he loves my working from home. He'll sit on my lap and he'll just hang out and he'll come and go as he wants to. And he helps out too, because he's diabetic. So sometimes we'll talk about, when I have a client who's like on medication for something and, he doesn't like his medicine, but it makes him feel better. But he's a sweetheart. He likes to cuddle. My other cat, Vera, she is 5 years old and she was a pregnant stray that a friend of ours found. And she had her babies and they got her checked out, made sure she was all healthy and everything. And now she lives with us. We don't know what her situation was, obviously, because she was a stray, but she's definitely got some trauma. She is scared of some very random things. We don't know why, but we just try to help her feel as comfortable as she can.
All right, that's really interesting stories.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with this, we've come to an end of all our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add in?
I don't think so. I love that you're doing this. This is great because there's a lot of stuff out there that like the adults make for teens, but I like another great thing with the internet is you get to figure out like, hey, here's what we need, here's what we're up to, and you get to like create it for yourselves. That's awesome.
Are we all looking with the background? This is the
it's
first time.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's work. Do you have a green screen?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say it's very like, so the one drawback of my hair is when I do the, obviously I have a green screen, but when I do the background, it thinks that part of the green screen. So, but yeah, these are great. But yeah,
They
looks
are.
awesome.
This is the end of today's podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Amy, for joining us today. We definitely have learned a lot from you. And I'm sure our listeners would be grateful for all the insight that you have given us today. Thank you so much once again.
Yeah, we really
Thank
loved
you.
having you with us.
Yeah.